Okay, and moving on, we have Dakota Gilliland. And Dakota Gilliland sent me a letter. Dave, I wrote a couple years ago, and you sent a cover for my pecker, the slacker horntoad. Thank you so much. No problem, Dakota. That was, like you say, that was a while ago. I took your advice on the title, and your drawing inspired the design of the character moving forward. I'm very glad about that. I'm glad I could be of help. I wanted to reach out again because I want to develop the character beyond strip gags, and I'm having a hard time. When I started drawing again, I was reading a lot of Carl Jung and using a lot of marijuana to get past my own ego. Pecker was born out of that. The human character Snacks is my own ego. He is anxious, nervous, and focused on himself. I'm reaching out to you because therapist has been very inspiring with the sort of thing I want to do with Pecker. I wanted to ask if you could offer up any advice. I also wanted your thoughts on if it's possible to build a dense, rich lore within the comic strip format. Anyway, thanks for your time. Sincerely, Dakota Gilliland. P.S. I heard Gavin McInnes mention you on his show a while back. I'm a fan of his too. I created a parody of Mr. Natural based on Gavin named Bodie Weiser. He featured it on his show once, proclaiming, quote, "This guy is pretty good at drawing," unquote. My inside art still sucks mostly, but I've grown a lot since we last spoke. So a lot to cover here, Dakota, and I hope you got my postcard telling you that this would be on Please Hold for Days Fem for September, and that you'll get some benefit out of this one. Okay, so I want to start with, I was reading a lot of Carl Jung and using a lot of marijuana to get past my own ego. I would take issue with that. And one of the notes that I wrote down was when you write Snacks is your ego, I was curious, is he innately, quote, anxious, nervous, and focused on himself, unquote, or has the marijuana made him that way? And getting back, always going, okay, if I'm going to actually discuss a subject like this, then I want to start looking at the terminology to start with. So I always go to the dictionary. And ego, which you're saying Snacks is your ego, the dictionary says a person's sense of self-esteem or self-importance is one of the definitions, as in a boost to my ego. In psychoanalysis, which really is what you're referencing here, the part of the mind that mediates between the conscious and the unconscious and is responsible for reality testing and a sense of personal identity. Compare with id and superego. Before I do that, one of the notes that I wrote on that, and this is where you get into Dave Sims' personal conflict with the whole concept of psychoanalysis. Since everyone perceives reality differently based on their own experiences, there is no way to test reality because each test produces a different result. And then I also wrote ego question. How can you tell the difference between, say, conscious mind, conscious brain, conscious thought, conscious memory, conscious perception, and conscious soul? Answer, you can't. None of them exist in a measurable form comparable to, say, my hand is 6.5 inches from my wrist to the top of the middle finger. So how can marijuana help you get past something that you don't know where and what it is, and you have no way of measuring? So then moving on to id, which you're saying that Pecker is your id as a character, the part of the mind in which innate instinctive impulses and primary processes are manifest. Okay, again, my problem with psychoanalysis, innate means inborn. Since newborns can't communicate with you, you can't know what was in them at birth and what is acquired and when it's acquired. My belief is that by design, man has an inborn sense of right and wrong, which is man's birthright from God. Choose right and reject wrong, or get engulfed by the consequences of your wrong choices, 0 or 1. But again, that's to me what I consider innate. Whatever way we were designed by God, this is what we have to work with. So if you're somebody like me who waited until age 40 to stop making wrong choices deliberately and start making right choices deliberately, I got a lot of stuff that has to be repented and atoned for before I can even theoretically get to the point where my wrong choices aren't in the way. So Dakota, long way around of saying, I think this is probably the premise that you would want to work with on your comic book and on your character, that these are unknowns, but we're all functioning as a society as if these are knowns, and not only knowns, but givens, the same as, gravity makes things fall to the earth. Nobody argues with that. The boiling point of water is whatever it is in Celsius. I believe it's 100 degrees Celsius. Nobody argues with that. So consequently, if you make that the central premise of your strip, that you don't know the answers to these questions, these are the given, in quotation marks, answers that society gives to these, and here's you arguing with yourself about it. And I think it would be a very versatile thing, because essentially what you've done is take this completely theoretical premise that's come down to us from Sigmund Freud, although Sigmund Freud has been completely disqualified by popular, quote, scientific, unquote, perception. And now you've layered on top of that, marijuana will help you get out of the way of my ego. So I would suggest that you start thinking in those terms, in terms of, okay, what are the elements here? How do I bring them down to a very, very basic, fundamental level, which is what you have to do with comic strips. And what is the discussion between my id, my ego, and my marijuana? And I think what you'll find is that your id really doesn't care where the discussion goes or what turns the discussion takes, as long as your id gets some more marijuana, because that's the nature of addictive substances. They aren't external to the experiment. You've made them the experiment. So from there, where did you go from that? I wanted to ask if you could offer up any advice. I also wanted your thoughts on if it's possible to build a dense, rich lore within the comic strip format. I think there's no question about that. An example that I would use of that in the comic strip field is Donna Simpson's Phoebe and Her Unicorn comic strip, which she began in 2012, and I would maintain it's a very entertaining strip, and it's a very very engaging strip. I think because she hit on something that is definitely a core element of modern society, and particularly since social media is overwhelming just about everyone who has a cell phone. It's impossible to have social media and a cell phone and keep yourself from getting sucked into it up to your eyeballs. And I think the unicorn in Phoebe and the Unicorn qualifies as a manifestation of that Donna Simpson started doing the strip. It wasn't called Phoebe at first. It was called something else. And went, no, the unicorn is the center of this. This was going to be one of the supporting characters, and it's like, no, this isn't a supporting character. I've only been working on this strip for a little while, and I already know that. And the more I work on it, the more I know that. And I would say that in that case, it's okay, taking that over into the area of psychoanalysis, it would have to be called fatuous narcissism, which is, I think, again, as is an implication, or I would definitely theorize that it's an implication of social media and cell phones. As soon as you have social media and cell phones and give them to somebody, what you're basically doing is supercharging fatuous narcissism, which is where the humor in the strip comes from, is that the unicorn is completely obsessed with the unicorn. Has obsessive self-interest as the unicorn's norm, as opposed to Phoebe, who's not all the way over there, but has inclinations in that direction. And it's like that would be my answer in terms of, is it possible to build a dense, rich lore within the comic strip format? Yes, definitely. And I would say, I don't know what Donna Simpson's, impression or reaction to my theorizing about the unicorn representing fatuous narcissism. I think you could build a very interesting collection of Phoebe and Her Unicorn comic strips that centered on that, in the same way that I forget the name of the individual back in the 1960s who wrote The Gospel According to Peanuts, and basically cherry-picked strips that to him represented Charles Schultz's Christianity, and built a pretty persuasive case and a very interesting bestseller of a book. I don't know if you want to send a link to this to Donna Simpson to say your script came up in conversation, and here's what Dave Sim had to say about it. In terms of, again, the if it's possible to build a dense, rich lore within the comic strip format. Now I am going to turn to Comics Journal number 38, which was actually donated by you, Matt, to the Service Archive. And this is the section of the interview, Gary Groth interviewing Gil Kane, about circling around exactly that subject. And this was the thing. Comics Journal number 38 came out in February 1977, when Cerebus was starting to evolve. And Gil Kane, I'm talking about, for instance, the difference between a comic book and a novel is not labor, not effort. It's the values. In other words, there are no meaningful values in a comic book. The people in comic books are two-dimensional people going through the most elementary kind of situation, not enough to sustain anybody's interest beyond an adolescent. A novel has characterization. It has suspense. It has a structured situation full of substantial values that will hold the interest of an intelligent person. That's what I mean. Those values, if they're properly translated, Harvey Kurtzman translated them into comics. His comics were literate, they were intelligent, they were humane, they were interesting, they were funny. They were everything. EC didn't have distribution, so they weren't successful. I'm just saying that it may not have been the answer then, but I suspect that it's the answer now, that there is a more select audience. I think that there will always be the kind of comics there are now, but I think there has to be an opening at the other end, an open-ended sort of situation in comics where comics can go on appealing to people as they grow up with them, instead of stopping at a certain point and having people grow out of comics. And Gary Groth asked at that point, how can comics transcend its own image? How can they widen their appeal? And Kane says, well, I think comics needs people with a broader range of interests. There are people who work in other areas besides comics who bring all sorts of intelligent commentary and intelligent points of view to their work. For instance, political cartoons. And I'll have to interrupt myself there to say that was alarm bells, red flag going off, skyrockets going off for me, where I went, right, a political cartoon, like in the newspaper, like in Time magazine, which I saw them every week, the best political cartoons of the week. Humor strips in newspapers are written in an infinitely more adult way. They're more intelligent. They're written for adults, by adults, with adult humor. They're really clever, and they represent adult values, and that's why adults read them. Adults read them because regardless of the fact that they're comics, they're dealing with adult frames of reference. And comic books don't have those frames of reference. They have these little fantasy things, and they aren't even interesting fantasies. The interest is in the drawing, the images, not in the writing. Gary Groth says, what is your definition of adult? As you know, there are adults who read Welcome Back, Kotter and love it. And Kane says, an adult is a mature person. I'm saying that comics have to be more mature. I'm saying that there are adolescent comics for adolescents. There are juvenile comics for juveniles. Obviously, a 9-year-old girl isn't going to be entertained by the same thing that an older person or a more mature person wants. So there you go, Dakota. I would say if you listen to that and say, right, adult values, things in my life that engage me as an adult, not things that engage me as nostalgia for my childhood. If you keep that front of mind and develop your strip going, okay, I'm interested in Carl Jung. I'm interested in the id, the ego, the superego. Well, I actually had a note on the superego. What did I do with that? There it is. The part of a person's mind that acts as a self-critical conscience, reflecting social standards learned from parents and teachers. I wrote a note on that one. A rabbi is a teacher, but you would hardly describe all teachers as rabbis. What you learn from a rabbi, you wouldn't learn from a teacher, and vice versa. So I think you're well on the way, Dakota. It's just a matter of going, right, keep my adult values and the things that engage me as an adult in the forefront of my mind, and then work on the strips, and then work on, okay, this is, to me, my ego character. This is my id. What do they have to say to each other about ego and id, and other things that you've become curious about as an adult? And okay, where's the humor in that? There's usually a great deal of humor in the same sense that a political cartoon, if you're a blue state kind of person and you're reading a red state newspaper and you read a red state cartoon about you as a blue state person, if it's a really, really, really good political cartoon, it's going to force you to see yourself as others see you, which is a very valuable thing and a very, very core element of any kind of literature. So there you go.
Okay.
I was wondering what you were going to say. I never know if it's going to be okay or if it's going to be here's something that knocked loose in my head while you were rambling on, Dave Sim.
Well, that's, in my strips, it's iguana versus beer, and every now and then when the psychology stuff comes up, I'm like, does that apply to my characters? And no, they're just jerks. Sometimes one of them's a bigger jerk than the other, but and it's never this character's a jerk and this character has to deal with the jerk, but is essentially an all right person. And it's always no, they're just jerks. One of them will say something to the other one that, in a real world context, would result in a black eye. Like that's what the nature of the strip is. It's verses. It doesn't matter what the issue is. They're just jerks.
Beavis and Butthead 2.0.
Well, to an extent, but I mean that's it's like in 2019. So it's been a couple of years. There was Inktober, and every October they do Inktober, where it's 31 prompts and you're supposed to draw something based on the prompt. And in 2019, I'm like, I'm going to try this. And I had a sketchbook, and okay, and the first prompt for day one was Swift. So I'm like, I'm going to try a photo primitive, because I know it won't be photorealistic, but it'll be, I'm going to try photo, the best to Matt's abilities of, I'm going to do Swift. I'll do Taylor Swift. And I started drawing a face, and I got half of the face, I got one eye and the nose, and it looked really good. And then I drew the other eye, and it was off center and way too big. And I went, okay, this is completely out the window. It is not going to look right. So let's just bring an iguana and beer and make it funny. So I finished the face and put on hair and put it in a frame. And then at the bottom of the frame, it's beer and iguana. And beer's going, is that supposed to be Taylor Swift or Sloth from the Goonies in a wig? And because Sloth in the Goonies is this misshapen character that his eyes aren't even, and he's a deformed freak that lives in the sewer type thing, and Iguana is dressed as a painter, turning and looking at Beer, going, "Fuck you!"
Right.
And I mean,
the The secret origin. The secret origin.
And every time I look at this picture, I laugh my ass off because just in my head, it's the whole, you can see that the character has spent hours slaving away, and the audience reaction is, that looks like crap.
Right. Take a lesson from that, Dakota. That is also part of the spectrum of what we're talking about for producing a dense, rich lore within the comic strip format.